Hey, y'all, I'm Bud Elliott, and this is Cover 3 College Football Summer School. We've done our research on the teams, and now we're bringing on the top team experts from the 24/7 Sports Network to help us fill in the blanks. Please follow us on Twitter at Cover 3 Podcast. That's Cover 3 Podcast. Hey, guys, Bud Elliott here, and I'm back with another edition of Summer School on the Cover 3 Podcast, where we're taking all the big college football teams, going over them, checking my notes, talking to the 24/7 Sports experts to see what we got right, what we got wrong, what we need to know about these squads as we enter summer and into fall camp. Transfer portal deadline coming up as we record this as well. And today we're going to talk about a program that's had a lot of turnover and a lot of positive vibes going on right now, and that's the Oregon Ducks. We're going to bring on Matt Prehm of our 24/7 Sports Duck territory to talk about it.
Hey guys, how's it going?
What's going on, man? Just checking his roster out and looking like things are probably not going to miss a beat too much up there. I would suspect North champions last year and another strong season for the Ducks.
Yeah, there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of optimism right now around this football program. Certainly, there was a little bit of anger, confusion, doubt when Cristobal left. I think at the beginning of the 2021 season, few people at Oregon in that facility, the fan base, didn't think he was going for a while. I don't think anyone really had locked in that he was going to be there forever, but it wasn't going to be in December that he would be gone. And when Lanning showed up, I think coming from Georgia, winning a national championship, and then just the persona he has really won over this fan base and this athletic department. Cristobal and Lanning are very similar and yet very far apart at the same time. I think that's a big reason why a lot of the optimism is here. The focus, the intensity for on-field coaching, for recruiting is very similar. But Mario was very old school football guy centric, very robotic. And Lanning is very much a people person, is very outgoing, very connects with anybody, it feels like. And that's resonated pretty well.
No doubt about it. So last year overall, 10-4, the power ratings didn't like them quite as much. I think the combination of the power ratings what Vegas has, like 38th, but still a quality year, actually led by the offense, 22nd rated offense, really efficient run game, passing game okay, and then when it came to time to hit explosive plays, really just weren't there. It was a little more sloggy than I guess Oregon fans haven't grown up on, Chip and all the great quarterbacks they've had there would probably like. But Bo Nix comes in this year. What are you expecting with Bo Nix and new offensive coordinator Kenny Dillingham?
Yeah, it's hard to be a quarterback at Oregon. There's a lot of expectations, and to be honest, some of it's kind of unfair or unrealistic because just of the run of guys that they've had. Akili Smith, Joey Harrington, Kellen Clemens, Darren Thomas, Mazzoli, Mariota, Herbert, Vernon Adams. I mean, all those guys are like some of the best quarterbacks in college football during the years that they were in school. And so that's kind of the expectation. Like when you get to Oregon, which is kind of ridiculous that you've got to be a top 10 quarterback nationally. And for Bo, it's, there was certainly some, really, they're taking Bo Nix. That's strange. He beat Oregon in 2019. Bo Nix wasn't really the phenomenal at Auburn. That's the guy that they're gonna take. But as he's been with the program, as he's spoken with the media, and certainly with the spring game and his performance, the more he's out in public, the more he wins over the program and the fan base. I think the expectation for Bo is he's the shot caller for one of the best offenses in the country. And I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to be top 5, that they're going to be top 10, but the expectation is they're a top 25 offense. They're prolific in running and throwing the football, and he's going to be the trigger man for that. That's kind of the expectation.
One of the real changes for Bo Nix probably will be that he'll have a lot better protection up front, I would guess, at Oregon. Looking at this depth chart, you can say what you want about Cristobal managing an offense. And I think there is something to be said for maybe him having his thumb on it a little bit too much compared to maybe what Moorhead perhaps wanted to run at times. But Cristobal did recruit the offensive line well generally, and all but one dude up there of consequence is back. So that this front line should be really an exceptional unit, right?
Yeah, it will be the best offensive line Bo Nix will play with in his college career. They don't have a Penei Sewell on roster. And what I mean by that is like a first round NFL left tackle or even just a first round draft pick. But Alex Forsyth, their starting center, TJ Bass, a guy that's played guard and tackle, Malasala Almuve, and then Stephen Jones. Those four are all NFL guys, and they all had to make decisions last season: go pro or come back, play for a new staff. They all chose to come back. They will all be, I would expect all of them to be on an NFL roster in some capacity, whether it's a draft pick or an undrafted free agent going into training camp next year. And then Ryan Walk is a former walk-on who I think is their best offensive lineman. He just doesn't have the measurables that the other ones do. He's like a 6'2" guard. Very, very athletic, really good. If he was 6'4", he would be a household name. And then they added Josh Connolly Jr., 5-star offensive tackle in 2022. He will help. Dawson Jaramillo was a utility guy last season. He will be in that same role this year. So, yeah, they're loaded up front. And that's a big reason why there's optimism that Bo Nix will be better at Oregon this season from internally at Oregon, because his protection will be as good as it's ever been in his career.
And obviously he's worked with Coach Kenny Dillingham before when Dillingham was at Auburn. So there's the familiarity there. Matt, the one question I have for you on the offense before I switch this over to the defense is they did lose a lot of targets at the receiver position. So Devin Williams, Johnny Johnson, Jalen Redd, Micah Pittman are all cross-offs on my sheet. All four of those guys are gone, correct? Now, Chase Cota from UCLA comes in, but is this a concern?
I think to a degree. Pittman never really materialized at Oregon. He was either hurt or inconsistent. But nonetheless, he was a 4-star guy. There was a lot of expectations that he would be really good. Jalen Redd, pound for pound, I think is the toughest Oregon player in the last 10 years, and that will be missed. His just leadership and his commitment to his team is just one of those guys that just doesn't put up amazing numbers, but just always seemed to make the play when it was needed. And then Devin, like you said, went pro. Johnny Johnson, solid guy. But the guys that are replacing them are all high-profile recruits. They were all way more sought after by colleges across the country. And so the talent on paper is going to be an upgrade. Dante Thornton, Troy Franklin, Chris Hudson, those guys were all highly recruited receivers. Seven McGee has moved from running back to receiver, and based on the spring game, amazing decision by Oregon staff to do that. He was tremendous. And so there's the optimism here. The thought process here is they've got the talent. The issue is they don't have a lot of bodies. Like, I think they went into spring camp, which is 9 scholarship receivers. Coda has been added to the mix. Kyle Casper, a 2023 recruit, reclassified. Don't see that very often in football. What's a realistic expectation for a reclass guy? I don't know that answer. They feel good about their 3 or 4 guys in the room, but behind that, there's not a lot of depth. And so I would worry. Injuries happen in football at every position. And what's going to happen when the receiver room gets hit with 1 or 2 injuries?
No doubt about it. Let's switch over to the defensive side here. It took a step back I think last year, no two ways about it. I mean, 60th in total defensive efficiency. I felt like they were decidedly more bend but don't break than they had been in prior years. Like they didn't allow explosive plays at a high rate, but they allowed sustained drives much more than I would have expected for an Oregon defense. I assume part of that is the the coaching change they had entering last year, right? But ultimately, little too bend but don't breaky for my taste. But when you have the speed that Oregon would seem to have,
there was a running joke that whenever Oregon would get into a 3rd and long situation on defense, the opposing team would got you right where we want you, because 3rd and long, like you said, that Oregon was so committed to not getting blown off over the top. They would give up the 3rd and 8, the 3rd and 12 plays consistently. The defensive coordinator was Tim DeRuyter. It was his first year. There was a lot of optimism when he showed up because, ironically enough, the team that's given Oregon fits the most the last couple of years in the Pac-12 North from a defensive perspective has been Cal. And so there was a lot of like, hey, we just stole the coordinator. He's going to help us. And that never really happened. I think injuries also played a factor in that. Everyone goes through injuries, but I would be shocked if you could find me another team that suffered the amount of injuries and the length that those injuries were going on than Oregon. Thibodeau was hurt for a while. His replacement, Braden Swinson, was hurt for a couple of games. They had 3 linebackers in the inside all go down, including 2 starting guys, Justin Flo, Drew Mathis, in the first 2 weeks of the season. The list goes on. And so I think a defense that was so concerned about getting beat deep and not allowing explosion plays combined with injuries really prevented this defense from playing its true potential. Because you're right, like they took a big step back. 2019, they were one of the best defenses in the country. I mean, they were straight up loaded.
Yeah.
And you could not score on them. You could not run on them. And they had lockdown corners. And to look at where they were in 2019 to 2021, with a lot of guys still on the team from those 2 squads, they're night and day.
No doubt about it. I know they lose Kayvon Thibodeau, but they bring back almost everybody else of importance along that front 7, it seems. Am I crazy to think they can hold serve their front 7 or maybe even take a step forward, given that KT did miss a lot of time?
We were the guys on Odds and Audibles, the show we do for Duck Territory, we just kind of talked about that after the spring game. Like we were running through just the depth charts and updating things, and we were like, are we crazy? But we think the D-line might be even better than what we anticipated. And we were already kind of high on that group. They don't have the pass rusher that Thibodeau was on roster. I mean, maybe Braden Swinson turns into that. I mean, go pop on the Ohio State film. He played in Thibodeau's spot in that game because Thibodeau was hurt, and he was tremendous until he himself got hurt in that game late in the 4th quarter. DJ Johnson, a former tight end who's now playing strictly defense.
The Miami transfer, right?
Yeah, Miami transfer. Okay. He had 4 sacks in Oregon's spring game, and he could have had a couple more if they just didn't allow – if they allowed the play to – they allowed the play to continue. So 2 names there to maybe see things play out from an edge rush perspective. But up front, they are really good. Popo Amave and Brandon Dorlus were 2 of the 5 best interior defensive linemen in the Pac-12 by Pro Football Focus. They're both back. And then they went and added Sam Tiamani from UW, who was also in that top 5. So, like, the expectation up front is they've got dudes, and it's going to be really tough to run on Oregon because then you pair with a Noah Sewell and a Justin Flo who's healthy, and Jeffrey Bassa, who replaced Flo as a true freshman last year. He moved from safety to linebacker, a kid from Utah. Absolutely tremendous player, really, really good. To the point where I don't think Flo is an automatic starter for Oregon next season, just because of the injury and just because of how good Bossa was. I think those will be your big three, and all three will play a ton. But I just don't automatically put Flo number one in the depth chart.
No doubt. Excuse me, Matt. We'll get you out of here on this. Really appreciate Matt Prehm's time from Duck Territory and the Odds and Audibles podcast. I feel like the secondary is the one question on this team that I really have. Like receiver, I feel like Oregon recruits enough athletes that they'll be okay. DB, though, it kind of scares me. 4 of the top 5 are gone. There's a weakness on this team or a real unanswered question. I think it's DB, right?
Yeah. Thibodeau gets a lot of the attention from last season, the last couple of years, but he wasn't the only All-American on defense that Oregon had last year. That was Verone McKinley, the other one. He's safety. He's now gone. He went pro. He will get drafted. His nickname was the General, and he was probably one of the smartest players we've seen come through Oregon in a long time. His dad played pro football. He just knew everything, got guys in position, made checks, all of that. That's a big loss. And then on top of that, Michael Wright went pro. DJ James transferred. He was supposed to be the heir apparent lockdown guy after Michael Wright. He transferred to Auburn, which was a bit of a surprise because he started last season. He was really good. He played a lot in 2020. Expectations, he'd be here. He's no longer here. And so they went out and hit the portal. They got Christian Gonzalez from Colorado, really good player, honorable mention, Pac-12 guy. They moved Triquez Bridges from corner to safety. Bridges played a lot last season. But they don't have a lot of production. Jamal Hill's back. He played a lot in 2020 on that championship team. And then 2019 and in 2021, he lost his job to Bennett Williams before Bennett was down for a season-ending injury early in the year. He was having potential all-conference, all-American maybe season before he got hurt. But they don't have much. They don't have a lot of depth. Cornerback is scary. It's Christian Gonzalez and a bunch of guys that haven't played. In the Pac-12 too, where a lot of teams are pass-oriented offenses, that's scary. Washington State, they always give teams fits, especially Oregon. Stanford and their tall receivers. Throw it now too. Yeah, and then you throw in, you get through the North and you go to the Pac-12 championship game. You're probably playing a Utah team who's just unbelievably physical, or the other option is USC, who's going to just throw a ton of receivers out there. So I think the cornerback in particular, but the DB room in general is a big concern. And if they have the spots if they get spots to open up from a depth chart perspective, they're at 85 right now. If one or two guys transfer out, which wouldn't surprise me, I would think they look at the portal to see who's out there from a cornerback perspective. You have one guy that's played substantial snaps. What kind of stinks for DJ James is he transferred out. He's an Alabama kid, but I looked at the timeline here. 10 days after he transferred to Auburn, their defensive coordinator Derek Mason left for Oklahoma State. So it may not impact. It was a weird decision. And that's one in which it was Adam Lanning's hands. He I don't even think he'd really even stepped foot on campus for more than 48 hours before he left. So you really can't fault Lanning for not being able to keep him. But it was just one where it was just like, man, that hurts because he was supposed to be your number one, and then he bolts.
No doubt. Matt Prehm, Duck Territory, really appreciate the time today here on the Cover 3 podcast, Summer School Edition, talking all things Oregon. Love to have you back on this fall to talk a little more Oregon, little season preview, little Pac-12 chatter. Matt, really appreciate the time, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
No doubt. All right, that's the bell. Cover 3 College Football Summer School is over for today, but don't worry. We'll be back soon with even more episodes filling you in on the top teams in college football. Please give us those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Follow us on YouTube and on Twitter at Cover 3 Podcast, and we'll see y'all soon.